Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare
Sri Caitanya Manavishtam Patitam Dhanavitare Saram Rupapadmayam Dadati Sapadantikam Mansakalpatrubhascha Kripasindhubhayavita Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You okay, Vasu?
No worries, man.
That's the spirit. It's the Vaikuntha attitude, yes. Because Vaikuntha means the place where there is no anxiety. So no worries. So, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu has taken permission from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, even though he is a sannyasi and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is a householder, and even though he's the Supreme Lord and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is his servant, and even though he was the one who enlightened Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, still, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was so senior, he in such an exalted position, he respected that. So that even in that, there's a point on how a devotee deals in the world. He respects the outside, the way that the outside world works, and he's exemplary in that way, unless Krishna specifically doesn't want him to be exemplary in that way. His natural way to act is an example for others. Generally, I asked Prabhupada that question. Actually, that was the first question I asked Prabhupada. Not exactly like that, but Prabhupada had said in the lecture, this was a Sunday feast lecture at 26 2nd Avenue actually, and he had said that Prahlad Maharaj he acted in the mode of goodness. So because I had been chanting already a few months, and since I already knew everything, I said, he asked for questions, I said, I thought Prahlad Maharaj was transcendental to the mode of goodness, and you said he was in the mode of goodness. He said, yes, but generally a devotee acts in the mode of goodness. So I found that a very interesting so after Acharya, if you remember, his response to Mahaprabhu's request for him to leave was that, yes, please, you stay another few days. And Mahaprabhu stayed another 5 days, and then it was getting time. Seeing Lord Jagannath, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu also begged permission. So we've seen this with the way that the devotees act when they, before they'll leave a place. Generally they'll go to seek the blessings of the deities before they leave and get the permission. And Krishnadas Kaviraj also, before beginning Caitanya Caritamrta, where he didn't know anyone, to a place where he didn't have any guarantee of Lord Jagannath Prasadam or any food for that matter, or even a place to stay. What was his jubilation? Why? Why was he jubilating? Why was he so happy?
Because he would be completely depending upon Krishna's mercy.
Yeah, there's an ecstasy in that. I must have told you that there's a pastime of one of the first disciples of Sri Ramanujacharya, asked him how he could really increase his faith, that really there was a God, and really that God was going to protect him. Because sometimes we believe there's a God, but we think, how is it possible that this insignificant rat he's going to take care of? So Sri Ramanujacharya, he gave them a simple instruction: go south. So he, being a proper disciple, took that simple not destruction, but instruction, and immediately started to go south. What to just go south? So he said, go south, so he went south. So he went south, and then the question is, where do you eat? Where do you sleep? And somehow or another, he went to a place, and when the night fell, it was inappropriate for him to walk any further. And he just asked someone, could I stay here? And yes, you can stay here. You're a gentleman. And they fed him. And then the next morning, he continued going south, and the same thing happened. He had food, he had shelter, he had a place to bathe, he had all his needs taken care of, although he wasn't providing them at all. And then this happened day after day after day for a week, until he got the point. And then he came back and he saw that Krishna was actually protecting him at every step. Because he wasn't in a position to protect himself. We consider ourselves the protector and the doer of so many different things. Kartaham iti manyate, thinking in that way. But it's actually illusion. And actually our protection is being, and care is being, we could say it's our karma, but a devotee sees Krishna's hand in everything. And because he sees Krishna's hand in everything, therefore he can be peaceful in this world. Does anyone know which verse of the Bhagavad Gita Prabhupada called the peace formula? You know what chapter it's in?
That is chapter 526.
20 or 30. 30. 20 or 29.
29, sorry.
It's okay, you're forgiven. And also I'll forgive myself too, because I had the verse wrong too. So what is that verse saying? What's the beginning of it? Bhoktaram jagatapasam. It is Krishna who is the enjoyer of all jagyas, of all sacrifices, and all tapasya. It is done for his pleasure. So that's really addressing the persons who perform jagyas as part of karma kanda, because there's three basic paths. Of course, we say four also of yoga, but there's karma, jnana, and bhakti. Yoga will be considered in bhakti, bhakti yoga. So for those who are performing sacrifices to different devatas to gain something of this world, so the concept is, I will give you this and you'll enjoy it, and therefore I will get a reciprocation from that of what I desired. But it is Krishna who is the enjoyer, Bhoktaram Jagatapasam, and Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the one behind the movements of the planets. He is the controller. He is the Supreme who is there everywhere. So when a jnani does his withdrawal from the material world and doesn't interact with the material world and is withdrawing his consciousness within, trying to understand who he is through understanding Vyatarek, who he is not. It's like when you have a tooth pulled or something like that. So you look at it and you say, well, I'm not my tooth because I'm looking at my tooth and there it is and I'm still here looking at it. So the tooth isn't me, so we could possibly, I don't recommend this, but as a method of self-realization, we could start cutting off different pieces of our body. Well, I'm not my finger, I'm not my wrist, I'm not my arm, I'm still here. That's not what we're recommending. But to see who one really is, the process of neti. To have a distance, a conscious distance between who one is and who one isn't. Has anyone ever tried that process? Like the process of jnana? It's very interesting. And you can even perceive yourself, or you probably all did it in your previous lives. You perceive yourself as not your body, and then more subtly than that, you perceive yourself as not your mind. You watch the mind's movements, which are quite gross in a sense, and then you can perceive yourself as not your intelligence even, that which seems to be watching the mind, the person who is you watching the mind and its movements, and the same with the intelligence. You could see that there's a person behind that, more and more subtle. One's consciousness gets more and more subtle, and then you can even break the identification with everything that's not you, and identify yourself on the jnani level as just the consciousness, the awareness that brings the consciousness immediately into the mode of goodness. Yeah, and consciousness, being aware of oneself as consciousness, is the product of goodness. It's just bringing the mind into goodness. Our mind is tortured, or we are tortured by the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance, actually speaking. It's straight out torture. And then when one ceases that identification, not theoretically, but actually stops identifying, then peace comes to one. But it is Krishna who is the one who's controlling everything. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's the one. So not only does the devotee see, when he sees himself, he doesn't stop at seeing himself as consciousness. He sees himself as a soul, an eternal servant of Krishna. And consciousness is a symptom of that soul. He is not consciousness. The jnanis identify with being consciousness, and the devotees understand that the symptoms of himself, of who he is that he's a conscious entity, and the nature of that conscious entity is that I am Krishna's eternal servant. And Krishna, as the next to last line of that verse says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. He is there as my Surit, just close to the heart friend. Surit means very close to the heart friend. So that's the way that the devotees practice and realize and can be peaceful in this world. Things are done for Krishna's pleasure because he is the one that is the beneficiary of all sacrifices. So a life becomes an offering. We could say a sacrifice, but it doesn't sound as nice as an offering. Our life can become an offering of he who is controlling everything. And how could we offer ourselves to anyone who's not in full control? So he's unlimitedly powerful. So if we are under his protection, then what do we have to fear? Especially because he's all powerful, but even more especially because if he's all powerful and our enemy, we're in the greatest of trouble. But if he's all powerful and Surit, our dearmost friend, near to the heart, Surit, Rit means the heart, so dear to us, then we can give ourselves to him, and it's just completely natural. So to put oneself in a realization, and Mahaprabhu, of course, was going south also, of dependence. That's what it means for the sannyas order, and that's really what it means for everyone. I once asked Prabhupada, I was in a particular mood. He was walking in Fiji, and myself and a few other devotees were with him, and he was talking about how sannyasis minimize their eating, minimize their sleeping. So I said, what about householders, Prabhupada? And Prabhupada replied, oh, householders, they can eat and sleep all day long. He had a sarcastic streak in him. Funny, yeah? Prabhupada was a minimum of one step ahead, always. So he was ecstatic, acting as a sannyasi, just going and depending on Krishna, confident of Krishna's care. Mukundangri, taking shelter. Aham Trishami. I will cross over the ocean of material existence by taking shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda. What does Mukunda mean? Yeah, and what's the other meaning? Oh, we know. Muk means what?
Face.
Face. And Kunda is a type of flower. So one whose smiling face blossoms like a lotus flower, like a flower, Mukunda. So in Bhakti Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami differentiates between devotees and jnanis. One way to differentiate or distinguish between them is the devotees' desire to serve Krishna, and the jnanis' desire liberation. So if a devotee is in a difficult situation, does that mean he's not allowed to wish it wasn't happening or something like that? Do they have to say, I want to stay in the material world because I'm not allowed to desire liberation? So he just says, how do you know, what's the difference between a devotee and a jnani? Because a devotee, he wants to be with Krishna. That means he wants to be in Vrindavan with Krishna. He wants to play with Krishna. He wants to serve Krishna in that kind of a loving, spontaneous, intimate way. So what's the difference then? He doesn't want to be in the material world. So the difference is one of proportion. So a devotee doesn't want to be in the miserable material world, but what he really wants is to serve Krishna with great love and devotion. So that's sort of so the not wanting to be in the material world is everything for a jnani, and it's just part of his devotion for a devotee. So thus receiving Lord Jagannath's permission in the form of the Agyamala. What does Agyamala mean?
Or the thread.
Anyone else want to get a wrong answer? Give a wrong answer, but almost or half right. No, you're half right. But you did it by knowing what the word Agya means. That's pretty good. It's the order. It's the reciprocation from the Lord that signifies permission or His order to do it. So the devotee wants to go as a servant of Krishna, so he takes it as the order of Krishna. So it's called the Agya, even though you've asked, can I go? But because the devotee he's really trying, his mood is one of service. So whatever he's doing, he wants to do it as service. So he's asking the Lord's permission to perform the service of what it is, whatever it is according to his situation. To serve through that. And that's considered, and I've seen this with devotees who have somehow or another, circumstantially or by choice at different times, they no longer have the service that they used to have, and then you ask them, what do you miss the most? And they say, service, my service. So service is no ordinary thing, actually. It's Krishna's gift. It's Krishna's gift, and that's what the devotee is praying for when he's chanting, allow me to serve you. Thus receiving Lord Jagannath's permission in the form of a garland. What is that called? Okay. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu offered obeisances, and then, in great jubilation, he prepared to depart for South India. Anande. What does Ananda mean?
Bliss.
Yeah, in great bliss. Translated here as jubilation. Dakshina Desh Chole Gora Hari. Accompanied by his personal associates and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu circumambulated the altar of Jagannath. Raise your hand if you have been inside the Jagannath temple. Have you circumambulated the altar?
I think so.
Next time you go. I think you're allowed to do that, is that right? You're not allowed to?
I'm not sure.
Will they let you in, or they think you're a pommy? Just don't speak English. They'll pick it up immediately. You speak Gujarati and Hindi?
No, just Gujarati.
Okay, you can go. It's all right. Well, so he then departed. After taking permission, he then departed on his South India tour. Well, the Lord was going along the path to Alalanath, which was located on the seashore. Just amazing. Just imagine how less anxiety it would be. He was going on a long journey, a 2-year journey, and he didn't have to pack. What a relief, right? And then with no anxiety of weight allowances, or did I forget this, or did I have enough clothes for this? Of course, South India was, because he's leaving. It's warm. It's warm too, so that makes it easier. But he's staying for North India. It's so cold, and then there's more you have to carry or get or something like that. But South India is good temperature. Well, the Lord was going along the path to Alalanath, which was located on the seashore. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya gave the following orders to Gopinathacharya. So interesting. Sarvabhauma Kohilena, he said to him, told Gopinath Acharya, bring the 4 sets of loincloth, the kopans, and outer garments I keep at home, and also some prasadam of Lord Jagannath. You may carry these things with the help of some brahmana. Anyone find anything interesting in that? Yeah.
You just now said that he didn't have to worry about packing anything. It seems like there's a little bit of packing to be done.
But he's not worrying about it. If someone's going to, okay, and he has someone to carry it too, as an assistant. That's the last time the 4 sets of clothes are mentioned, though. So it's not clear whether, if as I remember, what Mahaprabhu actually took with him. But because I was always thinking that it would be difficult, what happens if it was rainy and you just wash your clothes and what do you do? So it seems like you need a second set, it seemed to me. But while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was departing, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya submitted the following at his lotus feet. My Lord, I have one final request that I hope you will kindly fulfill. Now what is he going to say at this point? He can't ask him to stay at my house for another 5 days because he's already left. What's it going to ask him? Anyone? Yeah.
To let one of the servants accompany him in order to carry his...
Nityananda Prabhu has already done that. So that servant is there, he's in the background, not mentioned. Because that's going to be his qualification. He's not going to make himself prominent. He's not going to interrupt Mahaprabhu's internal meditation and thoughts, but he's going to silently be there when required to fulfill the needs of Mahaprabhu, so he's not at all inconvenienced. He has to. So it's a very deep qualification to be a servant. You have to be able to anticipate the needs of the one you're serving, but not in a pushy way. You need this now, don't you? No, not yes, you do. Not in a pushy way at all. But you have to really know the mind of the person you're serving to be a proper servant, and therefore it's very, very, very subtle business, and that means you have to know the mind, you have to want to know, you have to want to serve, you have to wish to please that person. So there's one time Prabhupada explained first class, second class, and third class servant. Does anyone know those 3? You know those? Yeah, what are they? Yeah, well you...
So
what's the first class servant?
the first class servant follows the instruction perfectly without having to be told what to do.
Okay, but if it's an instruction, then he's already been instructed.
No. So like he does.
He knows, he anticipates, and he knows what to do without being asked.
Yeah.
Second class?
He does exactly what is being asked of him.
He after receiving the instruction, he does it. And then third class? That one's easy.
After repeatedly being taught.
He still doesn't do it. Okay. So he's pleased. He's asking in a humble way. It's so interesting that he's asking in such a humble way. And look what he's going to ask. In the town of Vidyanagara, on the bank of the Godavari, there's a responsible government officer named Ramananda Roy. Please do not neglect him, thinking he belongs to a Sudra family engaged in material activities, because he's a government officer. He's not renounced. He's not a learned brahmana. he's a married person, and he's in the government, and that means he has power. So Mahaprabhu didn't like to associate. So he's saying, please, don't neglect him. This is my request. It is my request that you meet him without fail. So this request is going to prove very important for the rest of Mahaprabhu's pastimes, because by meeting Ramananda Roy, Mahaprabhu is going to meet one of his two most intimate associates. And the first one is Swarup Damodar. And those two would be the ones who, when Mahaprabhu is really experiencing his internal ecstasies, especially in the last 12 years of his Leela pastimes in this world, they were going to assist him. And when he's in the mood of deep separation from Krishna, when he's in that mood, they're going to trying to relieve him of that separation by singing songs and reciting verses of meeting. And they're so qualified. These two persons are qualified on the level of Mahaprabhu. So therefore, they can associate with him when he's on the level of relishing separation from Krishna, in the mood of Srimati Radharani. They're on such a level they can associate with him on that level. So this is Sarvabhauma, but the meeting comes of Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy comes through. It's like when you go to, if you go to a Nobel Prize winning physicists. So, we could, if we meet with such a person, we could talk about the Bhagavad Gita, we could talk about Bhagavatam perhaps, or Caitanya Caritamrta, or we could talk about the weather, or we could talk about diet, or we could talk about this, but we can't talk about physics, which is where his mind is thinking on the physics level. We could talk about how to make glass. But we can't talk on the level where he's really, most of his thoughts are existing on. You have to be on that level, and even if you're a good physicist, you still can't talk on that level, because there's such abstraction and there's such previously thought of depths. He's considered so many things. So these two people, and then Raghunath Das Goswami assisting Sri Swarup Damodar. They were always with Mahaprabhu in the last 12 years when he manifested his deepest of internal moods. So if one wants to be near the fire, one has to become very, very fiery oneself. One has to be like fire. The Vrindavan is on to be there, otherwise you'll be there as a tourist. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya requested him, meet him without fail. Avasya Milave. Certainly you should meet him. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya continued, describing why Mahaprabhu should meet him. Ramananda Roy is a fit person to associate with you. Now what would have been another way to say that? That would have been almost the same but completely improper according to etiquette. Yes?
Qualified?
That's not what I was thinking of. He's a fit person. He's saying you should go there and meet him. So you might want to say, he'd be a fit person for you to associate with.
Yeah.
But that's not
Yes.
proper
Yeah.
to speak like that. Because then you're saying, even though it's true, it was Mahaprabhu felt it was my fortune, but proper way to say it is a fit person for you to associate with you. In other words, he's qualified to be in your association. He has that kind of exalted consciousness that will not cause disharmony in your consciousness. It will rather will supplement your consciousness. Not like the chorus who just sing one song that no one likes. So if you want to have a symphony, you don't invite crows because they're not the right person to associate, not the right birds to associate with sweet singing. What bird sings sweetly? Huh? Coils, peacocks. And there's these little kind of canaries that you don't see very often, but in China they really like them. They just sing so sweetly. They're for royalty. Ramananda Roy is a fit person to associate with you. No other devotee can compare with him in knowledge of the transcendental. Rasika Bhakta Nahi Tandarasam. So in the whole world, the Prithvi, in the whole world, there is no bhakta who is equal to him, no devotee who is equal to him in understanding rasaka. He's I could not realize that his topics and endeavors were all transcendentally uncommon. I made fun of him simply because he was a Vaishnava, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, before Mahaprabhu changed his heart, he was the greatest really learned. And then one sees the ocean of knowledge. It's the little intellectuals that have arrogance, but not the actual greatly intelligent persons. You also will acknowledge his greatness. Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu accepted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's request that he meet Ramananda Roy, and bidding Sarvabhauma farewell, the Lord embraced him. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu asked the Bhattacharya to bless in the devotional service of Lord Krishna at home, so that while he was at home, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was at home, he should bless him, to bless him. more and more subtleties and more things in the Bhagavatam, what it was saying when the kings, they were imprisoned, and they sent a message to Krishna saying, please, we're your servants. How could Jarasandha, who is so envious of you, how could he be prospering and we are suffering and we're surrendered to you, we're your servants. So please, reverse this. Release us. And Krishna said, yes. He sent the message back, yes, I will do that. And then 3 months passed. He stayed in Hastinapur with Yudhisthira, and he and Arjuna would go hunting every day and do this and that and do this and that. And every day Yudhisthira would perform a festival for the pleasure of Krishna, and the kings were... He was torturing them because they were devotees. And then when Krishna finally did come, when Krishna stood before them, beautiful Krishna, effulgent Krishna, then all their misery that they had experienced immediately vanquished, and they basically said, your plan was better than ours, because they had time to think that their faith must have been tested. It doesn't speak about that. You know, we think, what's the use of praying to someone who's not going to do what I say, even though he's all powerful, who's not going to do what I say when I give me what I want, when I want it, as I want it. And what's the use otherwise? If he's not my order supplier, and that's, even though we laugh at that, and it seems so ridiculous on one level, but that's the way that most religions work. Like, rather than we're taught that bhakti means satisfying Krishna. Rishikesha, Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti. That's what bhakti means, that you use your senses to satisfy Krishna. But most of the world's, even pious people who accept God and consider themselves members of a particular religion, they're thinking that the purpose of this is dharma, artha, kama, or moksha. Some religiosity and piety for the purpose of gaining wealth, artha, and the wealth of kama, to fulfill my desires, and then liberation from all the suffering. That's the purpose of it. And it's all me-centered. And Krishna consciousness, as the very name implies, is Krishna-centered, and you can't do it without bhakti. You can't do it without devotion. You can't do it without truly loving the person. And the process of bhakti is the process of actually falling in love with that person by going through life and traveling south in our own way. Even there's an expression, isn't there, that, how does your work go? It's really gone south. Is that an expression? What does that mean?
Not great.
Huh? Getting worse every day. It's not what I expected. It's not nice. Where do the people who are already south go? It's really gone into the ocean. So he prayed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's mercy and by the power of his prayers. So the Lord is setting an example that to need the blessings of the devotees. Humble humility. Saying this, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu departed on his tour, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he embraced Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He said, please bless me, and then he left. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what did he do? Just one selfie first, please. No, he fainted. Just naturally, spontaneously, the life left his body, because for these devotees, they're devoted. That means when the object of one's devotion leaves, it's like they're giving their life. And when their life leaves, the body falls. So, not completely spontaneous. And how did Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu react? He asked him for his blessings. He, please stay 5 more days. And then Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu did not take notice of him. Rather, he left quickly. Who can understand the mind and intention of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu? Srila Prabhupada's purport. It was naturally expected that when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya fainted and fell to the ground, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu would have taken care of him and waited for him to regain consciousness, but he did not do so. Rather, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu immediately started on his tour. It is therefore very difficult to understand the activities of a transcendental person. Sometimes they may seem rather odd, but a transcendental personality remains in his position unaffected by material considerations. So, seemingly contradictory behavior. I thought you were Surit. I thought you were the friend of everyone. Seeming contradictory behavior is not a fault in a great person. This is the nature, Kaviraj Goswami says, of the mind of an uncommon personality. Sometimes it is soft like a flower, but sometimes it is as hard as a thunderbolt. And then he quotes, the hearts of those who are above common behavior are sometimes harder than a thunderbolt, and sometimes softer than a flower. How can one accommodate such contradictions in great personalities? And then the final verse that we'll read. Lord Nityananda Prabhu raised Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and with the help of his men, Nityananda Prabhu's men, they saw him to his home. They brought him home and took care of him. So what point comes through that? Yes, Linda.
It wasn't like he was left in the Sahara and forgotten about.
To be eaten by wild dogs. You forgot that part.
It was nice, in a sense. He was nicely taken care of.
By
Lord Nityananda.
Lord Nityananda. So when the devotees, when they're really in distress, they go to Nitai. Who's very merciful. So there's so much meaning in that too. But okay, we'll stop here. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
So, when Lord Chaitanya delivered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, there were many reasons behind it. Was one of the reasons that he was the family member of like Gopinath Acharya, and because Gopinath Acharya was already a great devotee, and that was one of the reasons for Lord Chaitanya delivering Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya.
Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said that. Yeah. There were many reasons. There was the practical reason that when the most learned scholar in the country, the Rajki Pandit, becomes a devotee, then everyone else becomes a devotee. That's the practical side of it. So Mahaprabhu actually says, I've come to Jagannath Puri actually just to deliver you.
But then that same principle did not apply for King Prataprudra, because Prataprudra had to go through, he had to wait for it a bit longer before he was
So what?
accepted
Yeah.
Chaitanya.
But then
Although
that same principle applied, actually. But just Mahaprabhu has his way of doing things. Because life is complicated too. And when you're like as an exemplary sannyasi, Mahaprabhu didn't want to get too close to the king. Because as soon as you have a boss, you have to please the boss. You have to do what the boss says. Yes? Is that your experience? Even if you don't like the boss, you naturally want to please the boss. So he wouldn't accept anything from Chandragupta, from the king. He lived in just a little hut somewhere. He wouldn't go on the payroll, because you can't advise neutrally for the person's benefit if you're employed by them. Then, when these great souls, Vaksiddhi on steroids, their words, by speaking truth, becomes very powerful, and what they say has power and comes. Because king, as soon as you have power, there's a tendency. Well, power means Shakti means you can control. Was the detached Brahmins and sannyasis, because they had knowledge and they weren't interested in the material world. They had a higher purpose, and that really is, in one sense, you could say the major difference between the mentality of prophet and the Indian mentality has its very root, due to the culture, especially previously, that this world is temporary. You can't enjoy here. You can't enjoy here because everything is going to bed. So, but the real point I wanted to make was, in that consciousness was the ephemeral nature of the material world, and that that there's something beyond that, and that mood is absent because of it. So much anxiety, so much suffering. The only peace formula is die instead of, and that's what they look at. Rest peacefully in eternal sleep. So that knowledge that this world is temporary, and ultimately whatever you gain, you have to give it up. In the West, it's also there, but it's not as philosophically foundation. So therefore, Prabhupada, when I understood this, I could understand why Prabhupada could preach the way he did. Because it's shastric, but it was fully realized, and it was are you ready for the adventure? The great mouth and holding tightly to Krishna's lotus feet. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. You were explaining about the neti process, and to some extent I've applied it to the slash brain.
Wait. Why is there a slash brain? Do you think you're intelligent? Because this is a whole, the land of science, where they show that people didn't have brains but yet have intelligence. Not only people, but even even the plants are called, they used to call them in Hong Kong shy plants, that they close the leaves, and then after a few minutes they open them up. Did you ever see those plants?
Personally, no.
Yeah, yeah. They must have them in just, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So that lifted the plants up and then dropped them this much. And every time it dropped them, the leaves would close to the shock. And then after a certain amount, and then the machine would pick them up like that. It remembered, then it forgot, and then it would start closing its leaves. So they don't have brains, and still they had enough intelligence to figure that out.
Right.
I mean, in some senses, they're more intelligent than I am. I do the same dumb things again and again and again and again. Until we learn. Then enough. So I just answered your question, and it's more subtle. The door neighbor of the super soul. So it's very, very subtle. But we just took issue with intelligence being the same as the brain, because the intelligence works through the brain. Of plants that cooperate, community. They form community, and when there's a lack of magnesium, and one series of plants has extra magnesium, they'll feed it to the other plants in their community, and there's all kinds of funny things like that. And then there's other ones where
They share a root system in the forest.
and they also, so the scientists will say instinct. Well, what's the difference
Right.
between instinct and intelligence?
Yeah.
It's just a word that they give to say that they don't